Sakuna of Rice and Ruin is a game unlike anything I've played before. For this reason alone, it grabbed my attention when it was released towards the end of 2020, and I've been playing it off and on for a while now. I didn't plan on doing a full review of the game, but after finally getting towards the end, I do think it's unique enough to warrant a deeper look, and for good reason. So, what is Sakuna of Rice and Ruin? Well, it's roughly 50% a very, very detailed rice farming game, emphasis on detailed, and 50% a side-scrolling action platformer with light RPG elements. This is not a dynamic I've ever seen in a game before, nor since, so I'll be sure to break down how it works in a bit. Before we dive into the gameplay, I do want to say I'm not someone who typically enjoys anything that's too deeply rooted in anime or Japanese mythology, so I was hesitant to pick this up initially, but it really only scratches the surface when it comes to those influences and has a very entertaining story to go along with it, so I think it's a game that can be enjoyed by basically anyone, no matter if your preferences are more Western or not.
Has been rewarded with the most unexpected encounter.
Speaking of the story, you might be entertained to find out that Sakuna, your main character, is essentially a spoiled brat. She is the goddess of harvest, and literally the whole reason the game exists is basically because she gets too drunk one night and burns down some rice fields. She is essentially banished from her duties as a goddess because of this and her selfish attitude in general. She must relearn the ancient art of rice farming with the help of a miscast team of mortals who wander into the lofty realm where she normally lives to learn some much needed life lessons and build her strength to take down some demons, which is the mission she was sent to complete as punishment for her failings as the harvest goddess. The premise, as strange as it is, ends up being a lot of fun and allows for all the characters to grow as they learn the hard way what it means to grow rice and work together to achieve a common goal.
Such ill-fitting behavior for the descendant of the capital's greatest warrior god. However, this might actually be good for her.
From here is where the gameplay loop begins to unfold. During the 3D farming aspects of the game, you will plant, water, and tend to the rice crops over the course of the seasons. However, this is not as simple as press A to plant and then water. No, this is a full-on rice growing simulator. And it's more interesting than it sounds. You will literally plant every single rice seedling and have the freedom to do so. After that, you will balance the water levels, pick weeds, create fertilizer, all in the efforts of growing the nicest rice crop you can. I've never seen a game as detailed as this when it comes to the farming. And even then, once that happens, you're still not done. You need to till soil, dry crops, and prepare them before they are ready to harvest. Over the seasons and years, you will develop better skills to aid your rice growing abilities, and the human characters begin to help more as well. They also prepare dinner for you, craft weapons, or assist with farming tasks directly if you want to focus on something else for a bit. I could keep going, but the ultimate goal of all this rice planting is to give you the necessary food to survive the full year, which will lead to a growth in your fighting powers and skill set for the platforming sections of the game.
It's done! This looks good.
So when you're not tending to your homestead, you will spend a lot of time exploring nearby sections of the island, accessed by an overlay map after leaving the farming area. This is where you will fight off the various demons and collect resources you need to make different items, grow your powers, and other light RPG mechanics. Obviously, this part of the game looks and plays completely different from the farming section, as it takes place across somewhat linear side-scrolling platforming sections. The combat is very quick and responsive, with the highlight being your scarf of sorts that lets you quickly maneuver around enemies, grapple surfaces, or pull off other special attacks. The combat can be a little tricky at times, especially early on, and when you come across larger groups of enemies, but it's offset by what ends up being a pretty vast variety of attacks to learn, the quick combat being something you can learn pretty quickly, and a decently forgiving save system to back out of any level that you are currently in a bit too much over your head with. The levels themselves also tend to be relatively small, meaning you won't get lost for hours, but are presented in bite-sized standalone platforming sections which balances out the gameplay and keeps the game focused. There are plenty of other aspects that deserve attention in Sakuna as well. There is an original soundtrack by Hiroyuki Oshima, who I will admit I know nothing about, but I do want to give a shout out here. The Japanese orchestrated music is beautiful at times and varied to the tune of over 40 original songs. To go along with the music, I really enjoyed the art style in the 3D farming section of the game, especially with the various weather effects. I can't really put words as to why this is, but I think it's the lighting, the weather, the day-night cycle, and atmosphere in general creates a wonderful little universe. It was always nice to go back to your farm after you spent some time fighting off some demons, which could ultimately be where the biggest challenge of the game is for some people. The story itself and the writing is well done and genuinely funny at times, to go along with pretty consistent voice acting. There really wasn't any aspect of the game I had any major gripes with. The only slight negative aspect to the game might be the learning curve. You do need to spend a considerable amount of time with the game to get a hand on how everything works, how to balance the farming with the combat, and how everything goes together. I can chalk this up to nothing existing quite like it before, but regardless, the journey is well worth it in the end. Sakuna of Rice and Ruin scores an easy 90 for me. The game provides plenty of bang for your buck and is well packaged and an original experience that is again unlike anything I've seen before in gaming. It may take a while to get used to the gameplay mechanics, but the end blend between the farming and side-scrolling platforming works about as well as I could possibly expect. With a few tweaks too, each of the farming and fighting sections could have been a game by itself, but the fact that they are both here and blended together nicely is awesome. I think it deserves your attention if you want to try something new, or if you're already a fan of a farming or side-scrolling or fighting genres. I easily see why Sakuna made so many Game of the Year lists from 2020, and you will not be disappointed if you also decide to give it a try now, especially that it typically retails for $30 or less.
Until then, you are banished from the capital.